Want to stay up to date with everything that's happening on the show? Or do you have a story that you'd like to submit for one of our Listener Stories episodes? You can get in touch with the show via the website at www.hauntedukpodcast.com, on Instagram at hauntedukpodcast, on X at hauntedukpod, or you can email us at contactus@hauntedukpodcast.com. We're also on Facebook and TikTok. And if you want to support the show, you can do it via either Patreon or Ko-fi. Both platforms have exactly the same content, but work in slightly different ways. One of the advantages of Patreon is its sleek user interface, but if you want to avoid those pesky additional charges Apple, Google, and Patreon apply to your subscription, then why not give Ko-fi a try? Simply open a browser window and type ko-fi/Haunted UK Podcast. That's Ko-fi/Haunted UK Podcast, and you'll soon find us. Whichever platform you choose, we're sure you'll enjoy the bonus content. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the episode. This is the Haunted UK Podcast's Short Haunts. Welcome, dear listeners, to our series of short haunts. A shot of scary, just for you. So grab a hot chocolate, maybe a tea, maybe something stronger, because this is Haunted UK Podcast's Short Haunts, the room with the nursery rhyme wallpaper. This episode in our series of short haunts is a very special one. It's special because it involves us doing something we've never done before in the entire history of this show. In July of 2024, we published a short haunt entitled New Build, Dark Past, which was sent in by Jackie. It told the story of when Jackie and her family moved into a new build house. So new, in fact, that when they went to see it, it still didn't have a front door. If you haven't yet listened to that episode, we highly recommend that you do. Although you don't need to for this short haunt to make sense. So please, pull up a chair and listen, because this is quite the story. In New Build Dark Past, even though the house was a new build, Jackie and her family experienced a variety of disturbing paranormal phenomena, including disembodied voices, full-body apparitions of not only people, but also animals, and strange swirling mists, electrical disturbances, poltergeist activity, and even noises which sounded like the ambience of an old workshop. The episode also follows Jackie as she begins a quest to try and find out who, or what, could be behind these phenomena, and the results of her research are truly stunning. As with a number of stories which we've covered on this podcast, it seems that what Jackie uncovered pointed directly to the land which the new build homes were constructed on, as being the main culprit. It was this land that over the course of hundreds of years had seemed to have absorbed so much of the energy from the past that it was now beginning to replay it all, right where Jackie's house was built. In a way, what was happening on the land was pure stone tape theory. Events from the past being absorbed, stored in the very fabric of the land, if you want to describe it that way, and then played back when a suitable trigger or triggers are exposed to it. But this wasn't the only time that Jackie had experienced strange paranormal phenomena. Years earlier, in an entirely different house and location, Jackie and her family would become witnesses to a series of events which were not only creepy and eerie, but would also turn out to have a profound and emotive effect on them. This is a sad, eerie, and unsettling account. So from here, we'll hand over to Jackie to tell her second short haunt, a real first for this show. Hi Steve, it's Jackie here. I wanted to reach out to you to thank you for retelling my short haunt, New Build Dark Past, so brilliantly. It's really excellent and still scary to this day, and the more I thought about it as I listened, the more I came to the realization that we were never welcome there at all. Even now to this very day, whenever I drive past that house, I still look up at the bedroom window, fully expecting to see something, someone who shouldn't be there. So you may be asking yourself if New Build Dark Past was the only reason for getting in touch with you again, and the answer is no, because I do have another experience, my very first one actually. We're going back to April 1993 and to a 2-bedroom house which my partner and I had just moved into. At the time, our son was just 3 months old, but almost immediately after moving in, things started to happen. One of the first things that we noticed was that while the rest of the house had been modernised, one particular room had been strangely left in its original state. This was obviously a child's bedroom originally, but hadn't been used as that for several years. It was decorated with a very unique and striking wallpaper, but we'll come back to that later. The neighbours who we spoke to had been there since the houses had been built in the late 1940s, and they confirmed that this was the style of decor that would have been popular back then, a style of decor which was only prominent in that room. Immediately, we noticed that when we put our baby to bed in this room, we'd get downstairs and then we would hear running footsteps. These footsteps would travel up and down the room, which ran the length of the house. It would always end up with the same scenario being played over and over again. One of us would go upstairs.
Who's there?
And the footsteps would stop. We'd get back downstairs and they would start up again, moving along the length of the room. We did this several times every night, and it would usually go on until around 8 or 9 p.m. I have goosebumps even writing about this now, some 31 years later, because it was just weird and frightening. I'd never experienced anything like this before, but I was determined not to let the situation get to me. However, this continued on for several weeks. And it wasn't just a case of my partner and myself being the only witnesses. Even visitors to the house would comment on it. They could all see that these strange footsteps weren't being made by our son, because he was still a baby and so little. It was obvious that it wasn't him walking around up there. So if it wasn't him, and there was nobody else upstairs, who the hell was it? The room had a very strange vibe to it, and as spring would give way to summer, I began to realize that the room was always freezing. It didn't seem to matter what steps we took to keep the room warm. It just wouldn't stay that way, and would quickly revert back to its much colder state. Because of this, I always had to make sure my baby was wrapped up well at bedtimes. So up to this point, we'd never really mentioned any of the strange goings-on in the house to anyone. That was until the day I spoke to my neighbour. We were outside, chatting away happily, when I thought I'd just bite the bullet and mention what was going on. As I spoke to her, I said it was almost like a naughty child was up there. Now, My neighbour was a lovely, chatty lady, but as soon as I began to tell her about the room and the footsteps, she clammed right up and gave me a strange look. She then quickly made her excuses and went back into her house. We never really talked anymore after that, which I found very peculiar. Why was I getting a reaction like this from my neighbour? Did she know something about the house? About that room? Something that she wasn't prepared to tell me? When my baby was 6 months old, I took him to the local baby playgroup, and it was here that I met someone who not only had a direct connection to the house, but also to that room. And she would go on to become a very good friend. Like me, she was a young mum, and as we began chatting and getting to know each other, we got around to the subject of houses and where we lived. As I described the house and its location, I could see her facial expression change. Because by some strange and weird coincidence, she'd grown up in that house. She asked me if the child's bedroom still had nursery rhyme wallpaper on the walls. And yes, it did. She then whispered something that totally convinced me that we weren't the first ones to have experienced strange phenomena in that house. She whispered,
"It was like that when we moved in, and it was my room, and I hated it in there. Hated it."
She was shuddering while she spoke, and it was quite clear that her memories of that house, and that room in particular, weren't good. As we continued to talk, I also brought up the weird and abrupt reaction from my neighbour. I described how she was completely normal and chatty 1 minute, but then becoming reluctant to talk as soon as I mentioned anything about the strange phenomena inside the house. My friend then confirmed that the very same thing happened to her mum when they lived there. She said that her mum had asked about the child's bedroom and even asked if there had been a naughty child who'd lived there at some point. And just like me, her mum got the same response as I did. She clammed up and wouldn't talk about it and very rarely spoke to them again. As we both got to know each other better, my friend came to the house to visit. As she stood in the back garden, she said,
"Have you, noticed this yet?"
and then pointed to an area of lush green grass. I will never forget what she said next. As we both looked at this out-of-place patch of grass, she said,
"Don't you think it's roughly the size and shape of a 3 or 4-year-old child?"
I was honestly terrified. And because this was before the onset of the internet, I couldn't even Google it as we would today. As time went on, I would find myself just standing in that bedroom, looking out of the window at that patch of grass, wondering, could it really be the final resting place of a young child? The footsteps continued to make their way from one end of the room to the other. And then one night, my little boy woke up screaming. Absolutely screaming. I ran into his room, picked him up and took him into our bed. In the morning when I got him changed, it looked like he had a pinch mark on one of his legs. There was absolutely no way that we'd done this to our little boy. So who had? That day, I made up my mind. I was going to stay in that room with my son all night, no matter what happened. If something in that room was going to attack my son, then it would have to go through me first. Later that evening, my son and I settled down, readying ourselves for whatever was going to happen next. At about 2:30 a.m., my baby woke up. I was still feeding him myself, so I picked him up and sat in a chair so I could feed him. As usual, the room was very cold, even though we were now in July and in the height of summer. My son fed for a while and I nodded off. It wasn't much later when I felt him pull away from me and turn his head. I was looking down towards the floor, but my son was looking away and smiling. I didn't move my head, but noticed two little shoes. Very old-fashioned T-bar sandal-type shoes. I honestly thought right there and then, shit, here we go, and slowly raised my head to look at whatever was in the room with my son and me. Staring straight at me was a small boy with red hair, freckles, and wearing a pair of old-fashioned blue shorts with braces. He looked around 3 or 4 years of age, and as I looked at him, my eyes were met with a very intense gaze. So I just smiled at him, and my baby was smiling at him too. Then he smiled back at me, and then he just wasn't there anymore. He'd simply disappeared. After that, there were no more disturbed nights, no more running footsteps, and even the room warmed up. We never did redecorate it in there, choosing instead to leave it exactly how it was. I became pregnant again, and my little boy had a new sister, and even though we coped for a while in the house, it was clear that we needed something bigger, so eventually we had to move. The final day came when we moved out, and as I was doing one last walkthrough in the afternoon, I got to the front door and was stopped dead in my tracks. I once again heard the running footsteps. But instead of feeling some sort of relief at the prospect of moving out, I felt sadness. Because from that moment, I knew that another family would have to get used to that little boy, and he would have to get used to them too. Kindest regards, Jackie. And that is where this short haunt ends. But is it where the spirit of that little boy ends? After hearing those familiar footsteps as she was about to leave for the last time, it was quite clear to Jackie that it wasn't the end. That someone else, some other family, would more than likely encounter the apparition of the boy, and also the effects on the atmosphere in that room which he had. There are many questions which this story leaves unanswered. The main one being, was the lush patch of grass the burial site of that young boy? World War II ended in September of 1945, and even though the UK was coming to terms with having to rebuild and restructure on a huge scale, life carried on. People went about their daily business, and the councils began to build houses. Times were very different back then, and with the country still in a state of semi-chaos, could it have been conceivable for a boy to just disappear, without people in the community even noticing? Was the child murdered, or did he die from disease? A victim of an accident and hushed up? Who was he? And why didn't anyone who lived in that house decorate that room? Why was it never modernized along with the rest of the house? Another series of questions have to be directed to the neighbour. Why did she become guarded whenever there was a mention of a naughty boy next door, or when the footsteps were heard? What exactly did she know that would make her clam up in such a quick fashion in front of different people? Had she been a witness to something truly terrible? Something that maybe she was sworn to secrecy over? Or had she been involved with whatever had happened to the boy? Whatever the case, one fact remains, and that is that it was not only Jackie, but also others who had very similar experiences inside that room. The spirit of the boy not only made himself known and seen, but fascinatingly, could also seem to sense when all was at ease between him and the inhabitants of the house. After appearing in front of Jackie, he then left her and her family alone, until he knew that he was being left alone again. We may never know the answers to the questions regarding the young child's final fate, and for all we know, the house may not even be there anymore, which leads us back to the land itself, and all the way back to Jackie's original short haunt. if the house isn't there anymore? Is it possible that the spirit of the boy could still be wandering the land, trying to find his room once more? But if the house is still there, and that room is still in its original state, have others who have lived there seen the boy? We can only speculate, but if you ever find yourselves house hunting, or maybe looking for somewhere to rent, then make sure you look around every room, get a sense of it, get your grounding, and have your ear primed for the patter of little feet across a carpeted room, because you never know. You could be the next person to see the boy in the room with the nursery rhyme wallpaper, and then, of course, the next person to be the subject of a short haunt will be you.